if you knew what was going to happen, why didn't you do anything about it?
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party. I'm your host, Jarvis Davis. Riding with me today, we have AtlantaFalcons.com's own Terrell McElhaney and Locked On Falcons host, who is the most humble host on the Locked On Podcast Network, my main man, Aaron Freeman. I want to start by saying thank you for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listener today. We are free and available wherever you download your podcast. Make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that from you in advance. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Coming up on today's show, man, that wasn't cool. And then we'll discuss Jimmy Lake's big adjustment in the second segment. But first, guys, we talked about last week about Raheem Morris having to pair these guys for the fired up coach bump, right? And AJ Terrell even said after the game, we knew they were going to come out hot and throw everything at us. We just started slow. We gave up a lot of stuff early running the football and passing the ball, and we kind of locked in a little too late. Tori, my question to you, if they knew this was coming, why weren't they able to do anything about it?
I mean, that's the question, and I wish I could tell you the answer, but I don't know. Like, you have these two examples in the last month of the season of when you showed up and did what you're supposed to do, and when you showed up and you didn't do what you're supposed to do. Case in point, the loss to the Seattle Seahawks. Case in point, the win over the Dallas Cowboys. Both of those situations were very reminiscent of this game coming in against the Saints, only the Saints had it so much worse. They're on a 7-game losing streak. They had just fired their head coach. But I mean, I did say, like, that's what makes them dangerous. Derek Carr literally said after the game, like, we had absolutely nothing to lose. They already fired our coach. We have really nothing. And I'll say this too. Darren Rizzi, he told the receivers before that game, he said, this is an open tryout for your opportunities in the league. When you sit there and you tell someone that, like, that their job's on the line, like, that's going to matter. And I think that when you're playing against a team that has nothing to lose, how do you combat that? But the thing about it is like, you should still be able to. Like, this team should have been able to. And that was what I talked about post game in my column. It's like, the teams who are championship caliber teams, the best teams, put a team like the Saints out of their misery in that particular situation. Like, you see a wounded animal and you're just like, bye, bud. Like, that's what should have happened. That's what should have happened, and that's not what happened at all. And I think it's disappointing. And I think Kirk Cousins said it the best, where it's like, this leaves a bad taste in your mouth because, one, it's the Saints, but also, two, because you should have beaten this team.
Yeah, and that's truly unfortunate because when you just think about how they got off to that bad start in their first quarter, and I think Raheem Morris even said something that to the point of, he was like, "Hey, we felt like they had the ball for the whole quarter. The Falcons defense just couldn't get off the field. The Falcons offense they had a 3 and out, and I think it's something to that effect, that whole starting the game with a 3 and out. It's just like, it just gets them in a mental space where, like, and it gets them in a mental space where it's just like, okay, this is how this is going to go today. And then you see the defense follow suit and not just being able to just get off the field on third down, and it just was like a snowball effect. But Aaron, when you think about like Tori just laid out, just being up against just this big momentum shift in this organization and them making that change, and Darren Rizzi just getting those guys fired up, like, hey man, you playing for your jobs. Like, this is what it is, and I'm gonna be straight up with you. How do the Falcons combat that? Or if they could, if it was a possibility of combating that, how would they have done that?
Well, I think you're talking about the expectation that the Saints would come out firing out of the gates, which they did, and basically the Falcons just have to sort of weather this storm and play their sort of football, which is finishing drives, maintaining possession, and unfortunately they weren't able to do that. You had the two missed field goals in the first half that really obviously hurt them, as well as later in the game. And I think that's really it, where it was just like the opportunities that the Falcons had to take advantage, to basically say, okay, this is going to be the Saints' best punch, and we might be down, a score or so at halftime or whatever, but we'll figure it out in the second half. And you just didn't get that version of the Falcons where they were able to take care of what they needed to take care of, which was turning those possessions into points in the first half. So I think that's really kind of where it fell short for the Falcons. And then they had to dig themselves out of that hole in the second half. And it was just a little bit too deep of a hole at that point for them to dig it, fully dig themselves out and come up with a win in this one.
Yeah, I think weathering the storm is definitely fitting. Like you said, and being able to combat that with, just trying to make sure that they don't get the big plays. You had the fourth down stop, and then when you have the defense get that fourth down stop, and what we've seen in the past is like having that cohesiveness as far as defense getting the momentum by making a big play or having a big stop, and then the offense comes back and scores a touchdown. Those how all three phases kind of working in conjunction with each other. And when they got that fourth down stop, you just didn't see that. And that's the unfortunate part about this team, in which essentially it kind of puts them in a situation where you're kind of questioning and looking at some similarities between that Seattle Seahawks game. But I think, given how I always talk about how the Falcons offense has to, had that magic number being at that 30 point. I always talk about they got to get a 30 piece, right? So, and obviously they didn't get there, with them losing 20-17. Do you then put this, Tori, is it fair to put this solely at square at the feet of Kirk Cousins? Because we know how Kirk Cousins goes. That's how this offense goes. And we know how this offense goes. If the offense is going pretty well, that pretty much everybody else going to follow suit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's fair to solely lay the game at his feet. I do think that you can collectively, like, it was a huge piece of the game. There were a lot of times where I even said on a couple of occasions, I was like, for some reason, he did not look comfortable in the pocket at all yesterday. And I don't know what the reasoning for that was. And I know that he, after the game, was kind of going through these different moments where he was like, I really wanted to connect with Drake on this or hit Ray here. And I think that he was looking back at the game in those moments and was kind of like realizing too the missed opportunities that he had and not connecting to some of these guys. But to your point, you're exactly right that, like, and I think I even wrote about this 2 weeks ago when I was like talking about how I felt like the Falcons offense was coming alive because you felt Kirk Cousins kind of coming alive. And to your point, where he goes, they go. And it didn't go very far yesterday and last night. But I can't just lay the loss at his feet. I just can't. Even though he too said, he was like, I don't even want to I know there's a lot of conversation about Younghoe Koo going on right now, as there should. Can't go 1-4 with 2 misses and a blocked field goal and people not talk about it. But Kirk Cousins, when he was asked about that specifically, he was like, I mean, he was like, we shouldn't even be running them out there. Like, we should fundamentally be getting into the end zone, and we didn't. And that's on us. But I do think there were a lot of issues, the sack, fumbles, the penalties that like push them back and push them back and push them back every time they got in the red zone. I mean, it just like operationally wasn't what I think we're used to seeing, and especially not in the last kind of couple of months. And then on top of that, the defense giving up the explosives that they did. And then of course special teams and Younghoe Koo missing a 9-point opportunity. That's you can't have that. But you can't just solely lay it at Kirk Cousins' feet. But you can lay a lot, but not all.
Okay, so yeah, I think that there definitely was some moments like even when he was talking about the interception when he threw to Tyrann Mathieu, he's
Mhm.
like he had Kyle Pitts right there. He was
Mhm.
right there. He had a check down, and we know Kyle Pitts. When you give him the football in those certain situations, these past month or so, he's been coming up big for those guys, regardless of the production that he's had, in that particular game. So, but Aaron, are you kind of on the same board as Tori as far as like? Not solely, but he's definitely was a part of the problem?
Yeah, sure. I think with Kirk, he missed some throws in this game, and if he makes those throws, we probably have a very different outcome. But I think that's the story of every NFL game, where the losing team always looks at the handful of plays and man, if we could have done that right, and then the winning team is like, oh boy, we got that
Yeah.
done.
How
So
did it happen?
I feel like with Kirk, he started off the game pretty slow. Obviously, had the interception late, but I think between those 2 points, from the first quarter on up to that interception, I thought he played generally pretty well. But as Tori said, you had some protection issues. It just seemed like the Falcons gave up a sack at like all the worst times in this game. They only gave up 3 sacks in this game, but they all seemed to come at like sort of backbreaking points. And then you throw in the missed field goals and whatnot. So it's hard for me to sit here and say this game is solely at Kirk's feet.
Mhm.
But certainly I do think when you look back at this game, it's like, yeah, there's just a couple throws that if Kirk could have back, um, you know, he would take those. And but overall, I wouldn't look at this game and be like, oh yeah, Kirk really screwed us in this one. I feel like there's been worse games that we've seen from Kirk Cousins so far this year that you could be a lot more critical of
Mhm.
him previously. So for this one, like, yeah, he deserves some of the blame because he didn't play his best football game. But at the same time, I do feel like in general, the Falcons offense, despite looking at the scoreboard, played well in this game. They ran the ball effectively. They were explosive through the air and whatnot. They just didn't finish drives. And I think that's ultimately where the failure is. And I don't know if Kirk Cousins is obviously Younghoe Koo missing some of those kicks, some of the protection issues. So it's hard for me to sort of single out Kirk as like the biggest issue on offense when it felt like a group effort that led to some of those breakdowns.
Yeah, I think one thing that I will always appreciate, about Kurt is he's a pro, he's a professional. Like you mentioned, like using that term. I love that term that you use, having being a grown up in the room. I think that that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to be a grown up and say, "Hey, here's where I messed up, and here's what I'm not going to do the next week, so we can get back on track as they get ready to go into the bye." Speaking of adjustments and being a grown up, how about Jimmy Lake? What adjustment did he make that only afforded the Saints to be able to get 3 points in the second half? We'll talk about that in the punter or the review. Gotta let you know that this episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby; it's a way of life. People, it takes a lot of energy to power through all day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime. Which is why they've created Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans just like you and I. The fans who are first in the parking lot, who are last to leave, we see you. We got this thing right here waiting just for you for 5 hour energy. So make sure you check it out and go see what all the hubbub is about. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, a whole lot of energy, whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or earning your jersey. Your game day to-do list is always a mile. Don't iron your jersey. And please, for God's sakes, do not tuck it in. I'm telling you, I will talk about you. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. So what's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. People, I'm talking about, if you didn't get a chance to get anything on the Falcons, I'm telling you, you got your chance tonight because guess what? Matthew Stafford is at 255 yards 255 yards, passing yards. All you got to do is pick more or less. You know what I'm going with? I'm going with more because I feel like that running game hasn't been right for the Rams all year. So all you got to do is just pick more, and you might be able to do your thing. Also, Tua Tagovailoa, he's at 242 yards, and you know what? I don't know if he's gonna be able to get there, so I'm going less with that one. So make sure you check out Prize Picks, guys, because this is what you need to do. And download the app and use code locked on NFL. You're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm telling you. Let me say that again. Just for all you folks who don't have ADHD and you can't listen, you can't hear, download the app today and use code locked on NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's run your game. Falcons lost 20-17, and it just didn't look good in that first quarter. And Aaron, one of the things that I was kind of going through in my mind, I was just like, all right, these people, they got to be able to get to the quarterback. But Derek Carr is a guy that, you don't necessarily have to sack him. You just got to move him off his spot. But for you, what was the big adjustment that Jimmy Lake made in that second half to where they were able to hold the Saints to 3 points and play well enough for the offense to be able to score enough points so they can win this game?
Well, I can't speak too much to the X's and O's because I haven't watched the film yet. But I think the main thing that stood out to me was you just started seeing guys in the secondary make plays, right? Whether in the first half you saw guys giving up plays on some of those explosive plays to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And then you didn't really see that in the second half. You had that big screen pass to Alvin Kamara or whatever on the one sort of same scoring drive in the third quarter. But I remember there was that play where Jawan Johnson caught the ball and D. Alford, sort of chopped him down. There was I think another play where I think Justin Simmons broke up a pass or made a tackle on third down and whatnot. And so it did seem like I know during the broadcast they just sort of mentioned how they probably put AJ Terrell on Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the second half, and so that kind of took him out of the equation. And then basically it limited the Saints' options down the field. And I think you're right, Jarvis. It did feel like the pressure was better in the second half, and you were able to get Derek Carr to move off his spot and throw the football away and all those various things. So I think overall the Falcons' defense kind of locked in the second half. But in terms of like the specific X's and O's thing, outside of maybe moving AJ Terrell to cover their top receiver in the first half, I can't really speak to that. But I think overall, whatever he did, it got everybody sort of realizing, okay, we need to go out there and play our brand of football. And I think you saw that in the second half.
Yeah, it was. I remember our conversation, going back to our conversation where we talked about on the Falcons postcast, just how it seemingly these guys came out a little flat. And I was even tweeting out during the game, especially, early on when with the big play to Valdez-Scantling, it seemed like Justin Simmons was just kind of just like, kind of just stuck. I was like, hey man, y'all better wake up. These guys ready to play, and he even talked about it after the game, just about how the frustration in starting like that, and how to going back to the word combat. It seemed like combat is the word for the day today. Like how they combat like coming out flat. And I think the secondary played well. That not only that play from D Offer, I thought that was an amazing play. I think Clark Phillips got, getting involved in the run game, coming down, making plays, TFLs. Like I love seeing those guys going out there and compete like that, especially, little guys, he's not the biggest man in the world, but he was out there playing big. I love to see that type of aggressiveness, and it's just truly unfortunate that they didn't start the game that way. But I feel just from Jimmy Lake being able to make these necessary adjustments, in the second half of games, and I'm sure Raheem Morris has something to do with it as well. I think it just speaks to the coaching. I don't think the scheme is the problem, to be honest with you. That's just me. So I feel like a lot of times it's on the players for them to be locked in. Like AJ Terrell said, we got locked in too late. Why? Lock in from the beginning of the game. This is your rival. This is the opportunity for you to be 5-0 in the division. This is the opportunity to be able to, really establish yourself and be taken seriously from a national perspective, if that's on your radar at all, and so I think that's the thing that kind of did it for me in this big game. But for you, Tori, what was it for you that you saw differently in that second half that made you say, like, oh, okay, all right, they got it right at halftime?
Yeah, I think moving AJ was important. I think that is the one thing that they did and made a conscious effort to do that made an immediate difference. But something I will say about this defense is that, to me, the game yesterday just fully kind of supports this idea that I've been playing around with, that defenses are living and breathing entities that evolve as games do. And,
Sure.
and I think that the Falcons are a really good example of this, because there have been so many times where they've given up a vast majority of their yards, whether it be in the run or in the pass, in the first half of games. And then you see them come out in the second half and be incredibly locked in, be incredibly locked down, and it almost feels like they haven't answered to just about everything that's thrown at them.
Sure.
That I don't know what that says about preparation going into the game versus these players being really smart players that can pick up on things and pick up on adjustments quickly in games. Like, I don't know, and I feel like probably both things are true at the
Sure.
same
Yeah.
time.
Possibly. Yeah.
But I do think that that is a calling card of this defense, that it gets smarter the more reps they get against some of these offenses. And I do think that's a strength of this defense. It speaks to the intelligence level of a lot of guys in this on this team. But how do you get that from go? I think that's what you have to now weigh. We know who this defense is. We know what they can do. We know what it looks like when they turn it on and when they kind of learn their enemy. So how do you get that in the first quarter?
Yeah, and I think that to kind of answer your question, I feel the making adjustments with rotations and going to rotations instead of set it and forget it with guys like Matthew Judon. We seen him kind of move kind of to a different part of the rotation, and and coming in on pass rush downs. I like that idea. I like the idea of that, and I think that about you guys, but I think for me, there was something about Artie Abikator, the way he was playing, like just specifically in the run game, as far as setting the edge and like being real hard at that. And I think that there was something in him that I saw that popped for me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, man, this dude is really playing some good football as of late. In these past couple of games, he's just been really shining out. Like,
Well, he's gotten
and
more
I
opportunities.
absolutely. Yeah. Imagine
Funny
that
what
concept.
happened. Yeah.
Imagine that concept. He plays more, he looks better. Oh my gosh. And to be honest, and think about it from this standpoint too. This just came to me. If Lorenzo Carter hadn't got hurt, we wouldn't even be seeing this. We wouldn't even be seeing this type of play. I don't even think we'd be having this conversation. But for you, Aaron, do you see, was there anyone that you saw that was like, oh, you know, I know I saw a tweet about Eddie Goldman. I don't know if that's somewhat is where you're going. I don't know if that's, I feel in my spirit that might be where you're going. But who was a guy that stood out for you?
Get out of my head, Jarvis. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Eddie Goldman, and the expectation. You saw a lot of base defense for the Falcons in this game, and I think Eddie Goldman has been basically used exclusively in the base defense. And I feel like when you've seen the Falcons run game struggle this year, it has been when they've been in nickel and they played in a lot of light boxes. And so one of the things I've harped on Locked On Falcons over the last several weeks is like maybe they should mix in Eddie Goldman a little bit more in their nickel fronts in order to beef that up, just because their issue is like they struggle to take on double teams. And what does Eddie Goldman do for a living? Is take on double teams. But you saw more of the base defense this week. You saw Eddie Goldman, I think, be a big part of why the Falcons were able to shut down the Saints' run offense in the second half. Now, first half, the Saints did have some success again early in the game. We didn't necessarily see the Falcons defense lock in that first quarter and whatnot, where the Saints were able to move the ball effectively on the ground. But I do feel like Eddie Goldman's presence, as well as the base defense overall, you saw, that sort of base nickel split that we saw earlier in the season when Nate Landman and Troy Anderson were both healthy, where Landman would get the base snaps and Anderson would get the nickel snaps. So you saw that sort of dynamic. So it's not just Eddie Goldman that sort of helped beef up the Falcons' run defense, but it was one of those things where it was like, okay, this was a little bit of vindication, at least for those people that are everydayers of the Locked On Falcons podcast, hearing me talk about Eddie Goldman the last couple of weeks.
Tori, what about you?
I don't know. I think that I will say I go back to that one play that D. Alford made that we were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
D. Alford is somebody who plays a position that I think a lot of people overlook. You can talk all day long about Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates, and you talk all day long about AJ Terrell. You don't really talk about D. Alford that much. And I know he had a game against Tampa Bay that wasn't his best game. I think he would say that. I think everybody would say that. And I think when you play a position like that, it can sometimes like seep into your psyche a little bit. But
Sure.
I thought that he, just from my memory, and I haven't watched the tape, but like just from my memory, I thought that he did a good job of taking away this like middle part of the field. I know that Alvin Kamara is going to get his touches. He's going to get his catches. But I do think that in terms of if D. Alford was around the ball, there was not a lot of like yards after catch or yards after contact. Right. I truly did feel like he kind of saved a few big plays, not even just the one that, gosh, I want on replay every single, that third down stop was something of beauty.
Yes.
But I do think that he did play a role, especially in that second half of taking gains that may have been 12, 13 yards and kind of keeping them more manageable at 4 or 5.
Yeah, D. Alford is a guy that has been on my radar for the entire season, because one thing about D, if he gets beat, he's going to be right there. It's not like he's just getting absolute like 3 or 4 yards away and the guy's taking off for a touchdown. If he's getting beat, it's an excellent throw and the wide receiver makes the catch and he's going down to the ground more
or
than
it's like a
likely.
matchup problem,
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a big matchup. Somebody's 6'4", something
Yeah.
like that. It was a great scheme play or whatever. So, and I love, that's all you can ask for a cornerback. It's specifically a nickel, because guys are going to try to take, essentially that's your third best corner for the most part. So guys are going to try to put their best wide receiver in that particular spot to try to get that mismatch. So, but yeah, I think he's just been overall doing a really solid job. So I'm with you on that one. Speaking of solid jobs, that wasn't cool what happened on Sunday. We'll discuss. First, we let you know that this episode of the Atlanta Football Party, is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off a gourmet site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Guys, Thanksgiving is right around the corner, so you need to get this stuff in order. Don't have your wife looking at you crazy when she's like, you're responsible for the meats. You need to doggone go get what we need, because I got the sides, you get the meats. That's how it works. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna check out Omaha Steaks. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at just $89.99, under $100. Come on, man. What are you waiting on? From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. That's omahasteaks.com. Plus, you all will get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. Also, guys, this episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel's America #1 sports book. You got to know it and believe it. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. This FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. So what are you waiting on? If you didn't get a chance to do something Sunday, it's Monday. So make sure you go check it out right now. So just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sports book. And I don't want you to never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up on the Atlanta football party, I am your host, Jarvis Davis. We got Tori McElhaney, who is just a wonderful human being. And then we have Aaron Freeman,
you.
who's the pettiest host on Locked On Podcast Network.
All right. I thought for a second he was going to say something nice about me, but then I realized this is Jarvis here. So,
Look,
continue.
man. Yes, like all the AKAs just come ringing in my head, man. So you the Jolly Green Giant and I'm the Jolly Black Giant. That's how we're just gonna roll, baby. That's how we're gonna do it. We the Black and Green brothers. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all take. I'm trying not to let this show go off the rails, guys. So y'all help me out.
We
here.
don't have Tenitra here to like bring us back.
I know.
It's
Like
really
that's why
tough.
I'm like the substitute teacher. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Like,
you are, yeah.
as long as everybody, we hit our points, we talk about everything that's good and perfect, and we good. We're gonna have a good laugh. You know what I'm saying? Like, hopefully everybody enjoying the show. And we thank you guys
Good.
for making the football party your first listen today. We're free
Please
to
come back.
Yes, please come. Don't leave. Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube and wherever you download your podcast. So, like I mentioned before the break, before this show really goes off the rails, one of the things that we talked about, you mentioned it earlier, Tori, about Younghoe Koo going 1 for 4. And, one of those was a block field goal. Two, he just flat out missed. And one thing that I tweeted out after the game, because it was kind of wearing on me a little bit, I said that, Younghoe Koo is a football player. He's a professional. This guy's been in the league. He understands what this business is all about. Like, it's what have you done for me lately? And what he's done lately hasn't been that good. I'm not just talking about in this game, because he's 71% on the season kicking field goals. Would it be wrong for the Falcons to just bring some kickers in just to work them out, just to see what's out there?
I mean, no, it's not wrong, because I think I don't remember what it is, but isn't he like 2 of 7 in the last like 4 games? I don't know if that's right now that I'm saying it out loud. But it's really difficult. Like it is, because you know what he's been for you. And that's what's, I think, so difficult and so hard about this conversation is like he has won you games, a lot of games. Like you look back at the last 3 seasons when the team went 7-10, and a lot of those seasons, a lot of those wins came down to what he did. Heck, even the first time around against the Saints, it came down to a career long from him. So I think that's why I kind of toss it up to like, yes, it's completely warranted to bring in guys. It is like it, and I think Younghoe Koo even in the locker room afterwards, like, this is on me. Like I know that this is not what this is not what I need to be providing. I need to be providing a lot more. But it's hard because it's kind of like it's a different side of the same coin, of the same person, that it's the person who has won you games, but then you saw what happened the last couple of weeks, and it's just tough. It's tough.
Yeah, it's hard not to look at the big picture, right? Like what he's done for you. And I was texting back and forth a former colleague of mine about Younghoe Koo and just talking about context. Like we always kind of agree that, hey, context is king. When it comes to certain things, and if he was really good for the Falcons for bad offensive teams and coming in and being the savior, with leading in points and just being that guy that for a fact when our offense stalls out, we know Young Wade's gonna get us some, at least get us 3 points, right? I always call him a three-piece snack. I was like, yep, cool, good for a three-piece snack for sure, right? But I think that now that this team has upgraded for coaching staff, players, they've thrown all this money at the quarterback position and draft capital as well. And bringing in guys like Matthew Judon, giving a third round pick, signing guys like Justin Simmons right before the season start. Like, this is a team that has raised their own standards, right? So I feel, but for you, Aaron, do you feel like there still needs to be some type of grace? I know we had a very interesting conversation. Probably wasn't interesting to you because you were like, hey man, get a man some grace, right? But has anything changed for you since we had our conversation on the Falcons podcast?
No, I think Younghoe Koo has done more than enough over the years that he deserves every opportunity to kick his way through, if you want to call this a slump, which is, I guess it's fair when you look at the numbers over the last couple of weeks, over the last month or so. Yeah, you would call this a slump. But I mean, I broke this down in Locked On Falcons yesterday, which is if you really, you talk about context, right? When you break it down by how far he's kicking, he's 5 of 8 on 50+ yard kicks. His career average would be about 6 of 8. And the one he's missed, basically underperformed, was a blocked field goal, a 53-yarder that got blocked against the Bucs, right? Then you look at under 30, he's 9 of 10, and his career average is basically a 98% hit rate. So he's about 1 under that. And of course, he had another one blocked on that. So when you look at those two ranges, you don't see an underperforming kicker. You just see the blocking breaking down, and that's why he's not connecting as he usually does on those. And then so it's really just the 40 to 49 yard range where he's 3 of 6, and he would normally be 5 of 6 or something like that from that range. And he missed one yesterday in that range, but that was basically, he was off by 6 inches. So I don't feel like we need to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater because he was off a kick by 6 inches. So to me, when I look at it, I feel like he's 2 kicks under performance, below expectation. And I don't feel like that's enough with Younghoe Koo, given his body of work, to feel like we need to panic and we need to bring in new kickers. As I said on yesterday's postcast, if this continues for multiple games, 3-4 weeks or whatever, then I would be concerned about it. But I think he's earned more than the benefit of the doubt to kick his way through this slump. And if it continues, then then we'll look back at the season and be like, man, that was a disappointing year for Younghoe Koo. He did not perform up to his usual standards, but his body of work to me is more than good enough that I would go into next season feeling like he's more than able to bounce back. So I don't have any concerns about Younghoe Koo. I'm not losing any sleep over it. Certainly, I'll be 14% more nervous during the games coming up if he continues to miss kicks. But for me, I feel like this has been one of the league's best kickers. And to me, the alternative of what is life like without having a kicker of Younghoe Koo's caliber, we had a taste of that 5 years ago when we had Giorgio Tavecchio, and you saw what replacement level kicking looks like in the NFL, and it wasn't great. And then Younghoe Koo came in and saved the season, so to speak. And we haven't looked back. And I'm not eager to go back to that point. So I feel like Koo, there's more than the grace to sort of kick his way out of this.
Also, one point, and then we can hop off, but get into the end zone. The offense has to shoulder some of this as well. You got to Aaron's point earlier, you've got to finish drives.
Yeah.
Don't put the game in your kicking team's hands. Take control of it. Score 6 instead of 3.
Yeah, bad teams depend on kickers. Sorry, average.
Kirk said it.
Yeah,
Kirk said it. He was like, you score touchdowns, you win. You kick field goals, you more than likely lose.
Yeah, it's like I said, this team will do whatever if they're going to meet their goals, whatever they were, coming into the season, winning the division, making a run in the playoffs. It's going to be through this offense, not Younghoe Koo. And I think that, talking about him in a light where you potentially talking about replacing him, it may seem like that, but I think overall, big picture, if the Falcons are going to get this win against the Broncos on the road, it's going to be because this offense scored 27 to 32 points, and the defense was figured out a way to get maybe one turnover to give them an extra possession, and they're going to go into the bye with a win. We want to say thank you guys for making Atlanta Football Party your first listen today. Why don't you stop by the Locked On Falcons podcast and make them your second listen of the day? I'm talking about the most humble host on the entire Locked On Podcast Network. Yes, Aaron Freeman. You just heard him. So yeah, go and hop over there once you're done with us right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And we will see you on Thursday for a double dose of the Atlanta Football Party.